Hey everybody, sorry we're 3 minutes late. We were just John here in the green room. So anyway, welcome. The the mine's kind of a gray green room. Anyway, so welcome to week 194. And we've got a special guest from PairPEO. Unfortunately, we had to settle for seconds because Jane came down with pneumonia. So we had to settle with the founder, Jeff Wanner. So you've had Jeff on here before. It'll be fun. And before we get into a lot of that fun and frivolity, a big shout out to the government. I needed to update my passport, and so I did the expeditions route and all that kind of stuff. Went to Walgreens, got my photo taken, and it came in like less than 10 days. I'm like, what? I was expecting, 2 months. So anyway, good job, government. Appreciate you. All right. So speaking of government, before we get into all things PEO, professional employment organizations, which this is really going to be a good one for you guys, because we did touch on a little bit last week, which is what made me go, hey, Jeff, can we do something about this? Before we dive into what in the world that is, the nuances, because it can be a confusing world, quite frankly, beneficial in many cases, but confusing. And Jeff's company really removes all that confusion, I think. So before we do that, Adam, Jack, any like current event stuff that we need to be talking about?
Oh, I could just run on forever how they need to pass the again, everybody's in favor of the tax reform that got that was around the edges that got passed in the House and an overwhelming show of bipartisan support. Not taken up in the Senate yet, but again, just reminder to everybody that kind of a big deal impact in terms of the depreciation rules that would be in effect for us, as well as the R&D credit. So still cautiously optimistic on that front. And then I'll be happy to have an opening tirade prior to Jeff starting about health insurance whenever you're ready, Gary.
Oh, that'll be a good little
Yeah.
preamble.
Yeah.
So before your tirade, I'll throw in
Yes.
kind of an update on the things that are going on with the aid package to Ukraine and Israel. This came out yesterday. So, initially there was this, the discussion about this bipartisan effort and that, basically Trump directed all Republicans to vote a certain way. The Senate did approve a package, and so here are kind of the details. And it goes to the House, and it's Republican led still. So here are the details. So Ukraine, about 60 billion would go to supporting Ukraine as it defends itself from the Russian invasion. 14 billion to allow Ukraine to rearm itself through the purchase of weapons and munitions, and another 15 billion for support services such as military training and intelligence training. 8 billion to government to continue basic operations. 1.6 billion to help Ukraine's private sector. Then as far as Israel, 14.1 billion to support Israeli and U.S. military operations. 4 billion go to boost Israeli air defenses. 1.2 billion for Iron Beam, a laser weapon system designed to intercept and destroy missiles. Now we're getting the sci-fi version of it, of the good stuff, right? Legislation also contains 9.2 billion in humanitarian assistance to provide food, water, shelter, medical in Gaza and the West Bank. And then there is spending related to China. 8 billion in the bill would go to support key partners in the Indo-Pacific and deter aggression by Chinese government. And 400 million to help nonprofits and places of worship make security enhancements and protect them from hate crimes that would be spent in the U.S. So for churches, synagogues, those kind of things. And language that would target sanctions on criminal organizations involved in the production of fentanyl. So a little bit of, grab all people would say pork in the barrel, pork, whatever that is. But no, I mean, this is real stuff. And that's been a problem. I think people's perception is, even yesterday I heard talk about, okay, getting on the Texas governor for putting people on buses and sending them to sanctuary cities. And yet these, we have issues here in the US with, all kinds of things like fentanyl and drugs and everything else. And so I'm glad to see that there is money that's being spent here in the US and all of this money, billion, obviously tens of billions of dollars, as I just said, going outside of the US border. So nothing political about that. It's just what it is.
So that's like what, 95% international?
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Hey, but we've got lots of money. Just keep printing it.
Yeah.
That's all we got to do.
Well, I mean, it's like, again, we've ranted for a long time. This is sort of the evidence of why tax rates probably need to go up. I mean, I haven't done the back of the scratch pad math, but if you took the national, and again, I'm not, generally for helping people out. So it's like, what's another bill at this point? At the same time, you kind of got to say the amount of debt that I'm responsible for personally now is equal to the median house price in the US. And by the way, there are 5 Boatsman family members. So if you multiply that times 5, it's $1 million freaking dollars, that we're all responsible for relative to the national debt. So it's like, and a bit of the debt that I have personally,
Right.
So it does get up there. But anyway, we ready to get cracking, Gary?
Yeah. Joe's on here, Papa Joe. He says, good time to be a tent manufacturer, distributor in Gaza. So that's probably true. But before we do that, I told Randall that we would address this too. And he sent a note that said 30,000 IRS agents targeting 1.5 million small business owners and massive fraud investigation. Like, what does that worry and blah, blah, blah. And the reality is they're probably sending a shot across the bow to make anybody that took PPP money and did it fraudulently, make them start shaking in their boots, because there were people that did it. And I also was talking with a business owner yesterday where they took the money, read the fine print, they needed the money, but they sent it back because they were so afraid. And then it ended up being forgiven. But, it's like, who knows? But again, the passport office, at least they got that together. So I appreciate that. So Jeff Wanner. Well, first of all, Adam, you said you had a little tirade about health insurance as kind of a preamble for Jeff Wanner and PairPEO.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where it's like, hey, just look at the facts. So I know that we're not political on this show, but I'm going to be political for a minute. The border problem's nothing new. I just was kind of curious myself. So I looked at immigration rates, like people caught, at the border, and it is high, right now, relatively speaking. But like, it was just as high in 2000, and then it went down and like Trump moved the needle a little bit, but he actually didn't move it a whole lot, relative to Obama. Like, it had already kind of gone down and been stable, and then has since gone back up again to actually kind of Bush era levels. So it's been a problem for a long time. It's a long way of saying so is health insurance. So like I think I shared this on a past webinar. I mean, I don't know what I should have expected in terms of pricing. If you just said, well, shouldn't health insurance, Jeff, shouldn't it have increased in price, relatively similar to my salary? Like starting wages of something, right? Like, I get that I get salary increase because of a promotion, but if you just look at real wage growth as an example, shouldn't it have been, about the same as that? And the answer is, I started this company in 2000, in its version that we see today, in 2006. So in 2006, President Bush was in office. And since that time to today, we've had several administrations and several Congresses. And I am not pleased to announce that my health insurance costs as a family are 4x what they were in the calendar year 2007. Just again, that's just a way of saying like this has always been a poop fest. So
Right.
so blaming somebody, it's like, well, get in line.
Right.
You know, there's plenty of people who could have done something. I like those, Jack. Thank you. There's plenty of people who could have done something about this and haven't done anything about it. So I kind of feel like, you know, what's the third rail of shit we're never going to fix around here? Immigration, Social Security, and health insurance,
Medical
evidently.
insurance.
medical costs, evidently.
Yeah.
So it's like, anyway. And
The good news, Adam, is that in Charlotte, if you bought a property in 2006, it probably has 4x since then as well.
yeah, so I got that going for me. Real rate, like I can't afford it because my rate hasn't gone up as much. But, you know, I'm otherwise
Yeah.
good. So my point in saying that is it you know, anything that you can do to really control the cost in addition to any other benefits that come out of utilizing a PEO, we're all for. So really appreciate you being on, because I mean, at the end of the day, you know, like if I just think about BGW as an example, you know, there's labor and there's health insurance, and I don't know what it used to be as a percentage of labor before, but you know, the all-in amount that we pay Blue Cross Blue Shield right now for health insurance, including what the employees pay for their family coverage, is about, I want to say it's coming up on like 6-7% of what we pay people, you know,
Right.
like as an item. So I mean, it's like somehow, and I can't remember exactly what the when they passed the Affordable Care fixes in the CARES Act, where they just try to, you know, index the subsidy to what you got paid. I think they capped it at 8%. So it's like at some point we just accepted that 8% of what you make is what you ought to pay for healthcare coverage, and that used to be like 1%.
Right.
You know, so it's like, wow, yeah. And I gotta tell you, man, paying for healthcare is like buying freaking tires for my car.
Yeah.
You know,
Nothing exciting.
buying a new HVAC system. You
Right.
know, like
Yeah.
foundation repairs, all stuff that I don't like to do. So anyway, that's a great way of segueing. Help us, man. How can you help us?
Yeah. And again, I don't know where you guys want me to start when it comes to like the industry as a whole. I mean,
bitch, whine, and moan with us if you can do that.
yeah, sure, I can do all those things. My wife can attest that I'm very confident
Yeah.
in all those categories.
Yeah.
But
Start
yeah,
with
and
what
again, like, go ahead,
a
Gray.
PEO is,
Yeah.
where it fits, who it helps, like where it, and typically where it doesn't fit as much.
Sure.
And maybe even some of the common misnomers about it, like, oh, well, they're no longer my employees, those kind of things. Okay.
Sure. I'm going to ask you to regurgitate those after we get through round one here. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I will.
yeah, the best way to describe a PEO, you operate inside of a co-employment relationship with a lot of other small, medium-sized businesses. And inside of that relationship, it really encompasses payroll systems. So basically, you're going to run inside of these PEOs payroll systems. That's going to give you access to their benefit, basically suite of offerings as it relates to benefits. Because you're aggregating all these companies together, you're obviously driving up a ton of buying power as it relates to benefits. So you as a 70-person CPA firm are now working inside of a conglomerate of, you know, hundreds of thousands of people. And the end goal for all of that is obviously to drive down your big number. And Adam, that gets back to your point. Like whenever I'm running numbers for a client inside of the PEO ecosystem, it's really trying to drive down medical premiums by 20 to 40%. Okay, which obviously, you know, if your numbers were back in 2006 when you were probably getting charged, I don't know, $150 for your medical plan, saving 20 to 40% doesn't really matter. But when you're paying $700 for your medical plan, you know, 20 to 40% starts mattering a whole lot differently. So there's always kind of different levers that end up getting pulled inside of any of these RFPs. And that's why I created my company to kind of help people sift through, is the math going to make sense for a client? Your administrative fees to be inside of this system are going to sometimes 10x the cost it costs you to run payroll today. So generally you've got a financial detriment there that you're trying to make good on. So you're probably going to lose about $70 per person per month, roughly $850 per person per year, and net new expenses associated with the actual administration of the relationship on the PEOs front. So again, if your premiums are in the 400s, it's hard to make that math work for you. Because if I'm saving 20 to 40% off a $400 premium, I may be creating basically a net neutral financial decision for an entrepreneur. The higher your baseline premiums become, the more that 20 to 40% is going to massively change the cost equation of that $70 detriment you're going to have on the administrative fees. So I would say that to answer your second question, which I believe is the why, like my company, like there's three different reasons to join a PEO, in my opinion. Startups like my company, I use a PEO for my company because I want to be able to scale without thinking about, okay, if I hire somebody out of market, do they have adequate benefit coverage, network coverage in that market? All these PEOs are leveraging national PPO networks to ensure that employees have access wherever they are employed. And also Jane, who is going to join here, she's out of Philadelphia. I don't know a damn thing about Pennsylvania employment law. So ultimately, you join a PEO for the opportunity to bring on employees wherever they sit, which obviously the whole work from home strategy over the pandemic has become a bit of an accelerant for the industry to make more of the business case. But in that situation, we're not trying to save money. We're trying to increase scaling velocity for employers. The second is a cost cutting play. So again, you get your premiums in that 450 to 550 range in an open market policy. That's the groups that are typically trying to drive down costs as an overall equation for their company while automating all these things to these platforms. And again, doing turnkey compliance if you've got employees in several different states. The third that folks generally will join PEOs for is when they're considering hiring an HR generalist underneath their chief people officer, their CHRO, their HR director, insert HR trendy topic, leadership position here. So you can outsource tactical HR, like inside of the PEO, it's going to automate all these things that are kind of just normal reactive HR questions that employees end up wanting to come to HR for that generally are not going to produce a ton of value for your culture or your organization as a whole. So instead of trying to hire somebody in, bring them into the organization, hope that they stay, like train them up to a spot where they're actually a productive use of your team, and then hope they stay, they can just outsource that tactical piece of the HR pie while lifting a lot of that, random distractions that the HR leader is dealing with that made them want to maybe hire somebody underneath them in the first place. Like I'd say that that's pretty much encompassing the whole like why to buy when it comes to PEO. It's diversifying your employee base to different states. It's scaling fast from the startup and not having to deal with a whole lot of paper minutia. And then it's ultimately trying to cut costs on the other end of that whenever groups like yours that have seen significant increases that are going to drive the financials in your favor to really explore and entertain the industry more seriously. Now, I don't know what questions 3 and 4 were, but Gary probably doesn't either at this point.
Well, we're just testing your young mind because you are the youngest one on here, man.
Oh, come on. I got two toddlers at home, man. I've got no young mind anymore. They stole all that.
Yeah, so the other one was some of the misnomers like, well, this co-employment, so they're not my employees anymore. Like, are you
Right.
guys going to train them? Like, let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd something. Yeah, I got a discipline problem. Can you take care of that, Jeff? I mean, so and so didn't get a tax return in on time. I want you to have a little sit down with them. Set them straight.
I would tell you guys, like I'd say that objection was much more prevalent when I first started in the industry about 10 years ago. I mean, realistically, like I look at PEOs as a automation and a back office support when it comes to like if you're trying to make a difficult termination that you're worried about ending up in a lawsuit for, like they can certainly advise you into what they would do to make sure that they're the ones that are fighting those legal battles on the back end. But really, when it comes to hire, fire, manage, like you have complete autonomy to do what you want with your employees. Nothing really changes there. It's just a different, W-2 name on your W-2 at the end of the year, which obviously is needed to be able to join into the benefits pool to get access to the benefit rates that are probably going to make you say yes to the or to the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. And for anybody watching this, you're going to think that Jeff is actually Christian McCaffrey. And he's not, because he doesn't play the piano. I found out that Christian McCaffrey is actually a piano virtuoso from Caratatio. So anyway, so we do have one guy that wanted to get a picture with Jeff at the original Pancake House because he lives up in South San Francisco area, and he said he wanted to show everybody that he was with Christian McCaffrey. So anyway, back off the rabbit trail.
Yeah, man, my brain's all washed from that Super Bowl loss, man. I don't know what's going on. I had to pivot industries, went to PEO from the NFL, man. It's a big leap.
Exactly. So let's talk about the size of companies because another misnomer I think is, oh, well, PEO really doesn't apply to a really small company. And yet we know Destination Wealth, our wealth management group, when they were just a couple people, they ended up going with PEO with you guys.
Yep.
So talk to us about like where it kind of makes sense and where it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, generally the PEO model only requires two people to be on the medical plan for them to execute out quotes and decide if the financials make sense. So like I'm a company of 4. I've been on a PEO since I was a company of 2. As soon as I had my wife hang up the teacher hat and needed to put benefits and stuff in place for the company. So like don't think about the bottom end of it is really just having 2 employees that want to be on benefits. Like that's usually the trigger moment for when our model can make a lot of sense. And because at that size, like you're not dealing with a massive admin fee delta there, right? Like, so if you got 5 employees and let's say you're charged like an extra $70 a month for administrative fees, that math's only going to be $1,800 delta per year to automate all the things that keep me focused on running my business. So I can make that case for an entrepreneur that's in that kind of spot where they're looking to make some hires that they need to put benefits in place for. More of the ones that are going to be kind of growing where you're kind of finding that cost reduction, like usually around 10 employees, if you've got a lot of folks enrolled in benefits, that's where you're going to start seeing some of the opportunities. And that's usually going to live from about 10 to 50 employees. Over 50 employees is when you're going to have more of the argument for, okay, we have a HR generalist that seems to be a 6-month hire, train, develop, they leave us, leverage a job offer. I mean, my generation is notorious for this. So you can't really count on a internal employee as much as you'd be able to count on just having an outsourced element for the tactical HR piece. Plus, you're going to save the money on the benefits anyway. So generally, you're going to win twice there, offloading a salary that you have in place that's been frustrating to solve for, and hopefully driving down benefits by 20 to 40%. But you're always kind of looking for, like, if I'm a client, like looking at PEO, you need to probably have somewhere between 60 and 70% of your employees taking benefits. And let me unpack that for a second. So if my industry is going to cost you an extra $70 per person per month to run payroll, and I've only got 50% of people that I'm impacting on benefit cost reduction, then that math's not going to swing in the favor of the entrepreneur or the employees really whenever you start reverse engineering that math. So the higher the percentage of folks that are on the medical plan is the bigger delta that we're creating as it relates to the overall total cost of the relationship. So I'd say that if you're hovering in that 60 to 70%, that's where things tend to make sense for my industry. Even if you have 10 employees and 7 of them are on the medical plan, typically we're going to have a pretty compelling reason to offer more benefits, better benefits at lower cost, and generally the total cost of the relationship will succeed over a traditional, payroll plus broker benefit solution.
So there's a good question that just came in, and hopefully you can answer this one, Jeff, but this came in from David. Said years ago there were a select few PEOs that did not submit the tax money, and then the IRS went after the employer when the PEO went bankrupt. Has this exposure been resolved?
Yeah, IRS rolled out a certification process. It's called certified PEOs, basically to keep that onus of those payroll or of those tax burdens onto the PEO. This happened a lot more back in the 90s and early 2000s as it relates to people basically being a couple man PEO shops saying they were submitting payroll taxes. And as soon as the bill came, they hightailed it out of the country and left the employers. And honestly, like there's a lot of reasons like that why this industry doesn't have 50% market share, which I think it should have in the right, if it was broadcasted the right way, but they've hit these stumbling blocks along the road. The industry's 40 years old, and I feel like every time they get some momentum, they hit a stumbling block that ends up allowing folks to kind of be steered away from the industry from a fear of what could happen, because there's definitely some bad press about what's happened to other employers in the past.
Yeah, so I'm gonna do a shameless plug for you, not because you're my friend, but because I think you really built a better mousetrap. And so let me describe what was the case before I met Jeff Wanner. What was the case when I was coaching CEOs and their management teams, um, a situation came up in particular, like, whoa, you guys ought to be looking at a PEO for a number of reasons. They didn't have a dedicated HR person. The one person that was trying to do it hated it. They didn't feel like they were getting great healthcare benefits, blah, blah, blah. So I introduced them to 3 different tiers. One, your former employer, Insperity, also formerly known as Administaff, high end, really quality, etc. I went kind of middle of the road, and then I went bargain basement that was still legit, but bargain basement. And what they ended up doing is they ended up going with the Cadillac. They ended up going with Insperity, but they had to go through the beauty pageant of 3 different people speaking different languages that they didn't understand and trying to make sense out of this. Like what, but they were all salespeople on why their widget was better than somebody else's widget. And it can be kind of numbing, it's like, what the heck is going on here? And everybody's pushing a product, whereas you came from an insider's knowledge because you came from Insperity, you knew all of your competitors, and you removed the beauty pageants. You went down from a business strategy perspective, and by the way, the client doesn't pay you. You're almost like an independent rep, if you will, by these other PEOs. So you get paid. And so it's a win-win-win for everybody. And if it doesn't make sense, you're going to be the one that says, hey, it doesn't make sense. And you also have some leverage power that they don't have if they are with somebody and it comes time to renew. Did I miss anything there?
No, I think you pretty much got my entrepreneurial seizure down pretty well there. When I was working in the direct rep seat, the traditional way of buying this is you're talking to direct reps, going through 3 or 4 sales meetings before you even see a price tag. As a 25-year-old trying to talk to entrepreneurs about HR outsourcing, I was like, okay, I'm going to go drive to Salisbury 3 times before I'm going to show this person a price tag that they can't afford. So I kind of just, as a W-2 employee, I just started laying all the pricing out initially. I'm like, hey, is this still going to be interesting if this is how the math's going to work? Because I had a good idea of how the math was going to work out for them. And I was like, well, why can't I just create this business model for clients that are looking at this industry and kind of qualifying if the finances make sense? So I like to tell clients, like, take the emotion out of it, like just focus on the finances. Like, let's look at the financial goals first, and let's figure out who is meeting those financial goals. And let's figure out if we want to interview any of those PEOs on the back end, depending on how much or far south we fell of those financial goals that we initially lay out. It just allows people to not spend time. Like I tell my clients, you should spend 15 minutes with me setting our goals, and you should spend 15 minutes with me reviewing if we achieve those goals. And then you should decide if it's worth your time for us to go ahead and interview these PEOs directly. The better part, and this is something that doesn't always, like clients don't really always understand this, but W-2 reps are generally paid one time on these conversions. Like our company is paid residually on our clients. So when it comes to agenda alignment, like we want our clients to have a downward trajectory in their costs. Like a lot of our clients go through renewals and they're getting decreases because we're bringing competitive leverage to the table every year, making sure that their costs are going in the right direction because it's financially beneficial for us and for our clients to experience year-over-year reductions, which allows us to continue our residual streams and continues our clients to champion us to, other introductions. So I'd say that's really the fundamental difference of working in this broker seat. I expect, and I predicted this whenever I started 5 years ago, that this broker seat should multiply like crazy. It hasn't multiplied nearly as aggressively as I was expecting it to. But if you think about all the things that PEOs touch, workers' comp, healthcare, dental vision, 401k, these are all broker-driven industries. And PEOs have always just been a direct sales initiative. And again, I think that's another reason why, it peaks around 15 to 20% market share of addressable market, because it's long-winded, oversold, and overcomplicated. And if people can just understand, okay, what does this mean for me and my employees, and then decide to engage, all that mystery goes out the window, and they can have a much more concise version of what they would otherwise do by going through the big dog and pony show.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Now, one thing, a question is, say that you find a PEO that is a match, seems to hit in all the areas. Do you still have flexibility? Let's say that you really love your 401k plan,
Yep.
where you're at, if you're at Fidelity, but these guys are with Schwab or whatever, right? Can you mix and match a little bit, or are you just stuck with their solution?
It's become a lot more a la carte. I mean, the industry as a whole has become much more flexible about employers allowing them to do what they want to do as it relates to what do you want and what do you don't want, or what do you not want. Some PEOs are very inflexible in that category. And I'd be lying if I said that everyone is kind of embracing this whole let clients pick what they want type of methodology. But, ultimately clients are going to dictate, hey, these things have to stay in place. And honestly, during our first call with clients, we try to figure out what's divorceable and what's not divorceable, so we can really make sure we're bringing solutions to the table that allow them to maintain the relationships that they find fruitful inside their organization.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Any questions from the gallery out there? You know what to do. Hit us with the Q&A. And one thing that I will say, so we went through this process. We've gone through it a couple times with Jeff, and in each case, he found us money. And we were switching HR people at the time, and we kind of let them make the choice. And at the time, they just were getting their feet underneath them, and they didn't want that additional change, so we didn't do it. But Jeff has been like in our corner, even though we didn't buy from him a couple cycles, just watching like a watchman on the wall, looking to see when it makes sense and when it doesn't. So I really appreciate anytime somebody is trying to serve us or our clients, and they're not pushy salespeople, because nobody really wants that, and to have to sit through 3 sessions, multiply that by 3 times with 3 different PEOs before you get down to the real nuts and bolts of does it make sense or not? I mean, good grief.
Right.
Here's a question from Papa Joe. Does it work well as well for 100 plus employees?
We have clients with thousands of employees. It all comes down to how the math shakes out and honestly what they're trying to accomplish. So yeah, I feel like we have entry points all the time in the hundreds of employees. We have clients that leave us at 100 employees, then they insource it if they've got a heck of a millennial healthy client base or employee base where they can self-insure and they can save money and they can manage their own stuff a little bit better. So it just kind of comes down to where a client's at, what they want to do. I just generally start with the finances first because I want to make sure I'm creating outcomes that are both beneficial for the company and for the employees. So it just depends. If the 100-person company has 30 people on the medical plan, they're going to tell me to kick rocks, or I'm going to tell myself to kick rocks as it relates to whether the financial case is going to be there. But if they got 60, 70 people on that medical plan, they should do quite well in a PEO environment.
So I have a question. I pulled out my cards, and so and it's from the employee side of things, what to expect on that side. So I'm looking at iMed for for vision, Aetna for medical, and CVS Caremark for prescription, right? And so that's what's provided. My wife works for an international pharmaceutical company, so great rates overall anyway. So, but let's say that with all these, and so let me see how I can say this. You had said that, okay, maybe it isn't an entire package. So it isn't that you would say, okay, the benefit would be that we're going to take IMED, Aetna, and CVS, and we're going to put you in with a different company that provides for all of those. Let's say it's
Right.
Cigna, right?
Sure.
And so how does all that work? What does it look like for me as a user, as an employee, if my employer decides to make changes to what I already have in front of me?
Sure. I mean, the easy path for an employer that's in that mindset is to replicate carriers. Like you can look at your Aetna plans inside of or your Aetna medical, and you can look at Aetna PEOs that are using Aetna's medical plans too. So you don't have to worry about necessarily removing a doctor that's in network or a facility that's in network today that would go away. That's the lion's share of the anxiety that employers and employees have, is when you make that carrier change on the medical. The rest of the things end up being rather arbitrary, frankly, when it comes to the ancillary, the dentals, the visions, prescription cards, those types of things, or who the HSA administrator is. Like, those things are rather immaterial. The carrier change on the medical is the most anxious decision that an employer has whenever they're making these types of transitions. So a lot of times when we're having that first conversation and understanding, like, okay, we need to stay inside of an Aetna ecosystem, then we would just focus on Aetna players. So we wouldn't be bringing United Healthcare and Blue Cross quotes to the table, as we know that's not going to really be a winner for that client.
And then maybe the optics of it would be that the amount of money that's taken out of my paycheck on a monthly basis hopefully becomes less, right? And so is that really kind of other than the anxiety, really the net change to me as a consumer?
Yeah, I would never advocate for a client to make a transition like this that leads to more dollars going out of their employee's pocket. So generally, like, let's say a client saving $100,000 in TCO of their traditional way of doing it into going into a PEO. Like, most employers will share a good portion of that savings back to the employees, because every employee is just like every employer when it comes to the expectation is benefit costs are going up, plan quality is coming down, and they get that over and over and over again. So if you can get a win there for them while also winning financially for the organization, then it really doesn't need to be a sell at that point. It's going to make sense.
All right. And so how about this scenario where it's not a net decrease? It is the least amount of increase that is going to happen just because medical costs are going up. Do you see that scenario happening where and I will tell you that happens within my law firm. Again, I'm fortunate that I'm not on my law firm's as a partner, basically self-employed partner. And there's costs, because I've seen, every year we go through our thing. It's like, okay, well, this year it's Cigna, next year it's Aetna. And like, thank goodness I don't have to deal with that. But I see the cost rising and the grumbling that, okay, well, this is the lesser of the evils. It's not that there is a net reduction in the premiums that are paid.
Yeah, that's a carrier hopping strategy that's very typical inside of the open market world that we live in. I mean, most of the time, like, are you asking about the initial entry point, or are you asking about subsequent renewals inside of the PEO environment that we manage with our team?
Subsequent renewals. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, the ideal outcome for our clients that are going through subsequent renewals is not to manage another payroll transition, right? So really what we're doing is we're running competitive RFPs to help them negotiate incumbent relationships where you would have no change management assigned to it. So, if you were going to get a 10% renewal, the industry basically sends out renewals in hopes that people say yes. Like, our role is to basically give them something to go back and say, we're considering making a change to this PEO. Here's the financials. Go make me your best offer, so that 10% increase becomes nothing. Now, if they're performing extremely unhealthy, like if their medical loss ratio is terrible, like the incumbent PEO may say, okay, kick rocks, we're going to keep our 10%, or they're going to play a game of chicken with the client. But the client ends up determining at the end of the day, like, what's worth moving for. And so it's kind of the same process over and over again, year over year. That same 15 minutes, financial goals that we're trying to achieve, go run the RFP, wait for the renewal, compare that against the RFP. share that with the incumbent, see if the incumbent comes down to make sure that they're kind of coming with their sharpest price point. And then the clients have an educated opportunity to make a transition if the math is way too meaningful for them to stay in the status quo relationship.
Okay, next question, unless there's one from the audience, but what would you say is the average number of PEOs that are in the mix as far as competitors that you're looking at? And then within each PEO, the number of companies like Aetna and Cigna that are looked at to be competitive, subject to restrictions like you don't want to switch.
Right.
What would you say are those average numbers of those two buckets?
Yeah, I think, I mean, generally after that first 15-minute conversation, we're going to eliminate quite a few PEOs based on what the client's going to want. So I'm ideally targeting a 5-vendor RFP process. Of those PEOs, like some PEOs operate with one master medical carrier. Insperity uses United Healthcare. TriNet here in North Carolina uses Blue Cross Blue Shield, but like some have different carrier flexibility as to what they're going to put in front of a client. So generally, like we're going to encompass all carriers through our RFP for the sake of bringing everybody's best proposal to the table. So it'd be kind of redundant to leverage 2 Aetna players that have the same plan makeup because their quotes are going to come within dollars of each other. But the main goal is obviously to make sure that our clients are never sitting in a spot where they're leveraged and just basically have to take a big increase on the chin.
So here's another question from Papa Joe. How do you deal with unknown employee health issues that HIPAA doesn't allow you as an employer to know about?
I don't deal with them at all. I mean, at the end of the day, like we submit clean census data to the PEOs. They assign and they have their own actuarial data as it relates to how they're underwriting these things, leveraging without getting too long-winded, like pharmacy data and expected large claims data based on what's going on inside the population. So whenever they give us their pricing, they're basing it off of the actual data of those employees that they can go and reconcile what the actual utilization is going to be like. The employer doesn't need to know that, nor should they know that. It's all down to what the PEOs are comfortable pricing it at based off of the risks that they're assigning to a given population.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Jeff,
Good question so far, man.
Yeah, Jeff, when do so I'm assuming this is still the case. Basically the health insurance companies make the most money off the people who can least afford it, which is the small business guy. Because we have no negotiating leverage. I'm assuming that's still true. And then B, so you can say yes or no on that. And then B, when, at what employer count do you start to see some stabilization? Because I mean, it's just funny because I remember when the Affordable Care Act came out, everybody, so like my health bills went up. It's like, well, they were going up anyway. But then like Bank of America, Monahan said, "This is the greatest thing that ever happened. My health insurance bills, actually went down." It's like, well, screw you. It's because you got 250,000 employees.
Right.
So like, when do you, when do you, yes, we're going to grow, Gary, just so we can get a lower health insurance bill.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding with
I mean,
that. When do things start to stabilize?
Well, they stabilize as your claims and utilization stabilizes, which is obviously a moving target that's impossible to predict. I mean, you could have a 10-person group that's leveraging like a level funded medical plan that gets complete optics into their utilization every month. And that could be super effective for them, but it also gets super scary whenever they realize they're running at a giant deficit in Q2. And because they're using that level funded plan, like everybody's going to want to see those claims to justify whatever price point they give them. But
Gary,
like
you call me next time you got a boo-boo and I'll fix that.
Next time
you don't need to be going to the ER.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the long and the short of it, man. Like like I do like the self-insured model. Whenever you've got a healthy population, you can start building a surplus for, because then you're obviously going to be able to use that surplus in the future for claims whenever things become a little bit more unkosher as it relates to utilization of the medical plans. but it often just depends on the health of the population of the people, which obviously you're never going to have 100% optics into on your end as it relates to like rolling these things out. And you don't know if when you roll it out, that first month and you realize your claims are or over, super high, then every increase you get thereafter is going to be obviously largely justified on that utilization. So yeah, like I would say that your folks at Bank of America's price point didn't go down. Bank of America was picking up more of the bill for the client or for their employees. So yeah, like when you see like your wife's benefits there at Jack, like yeah, they have good benefits, but they're probably paying for a significant portion of that because if they're international, then generally they're used to paying 100% of the premiums as it relates to how they're contributing to the healthcare costs versus the cost share model that the U.S. deploys almost universally across our system.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, so I'd say like the real gist of it is like I mean with our company we just look at everything. Like at the end of the day, like look at it whenever they're 5 employees, look at it when they're 10 employees. Like you guys, we've looked at your guys' files for the last couple of years and really haven't, in my mind, come back with the definitely yes type of proposal. And our mindset for it all is very long viewed. I mean, I'm a 34-year-old entrepreneur. I'm going to run this company for hopefully the next 15 years. So like, if it doesn't make sense the first time around, I'm not pushing a rope to make it make sense. I'm going to walk away and look at it again as their company continues to grow. When their companies grow, their bills grow, and all of a sudden my reduction ends up being a heck of a lot more meaningful than it was whenever they initially started with something that was very low cost.
Did you just say 15 years? What? I'm just kidding. I'm
I
giving you
know.
a
Yeah.
hard time.
Well, I'm Brock's going to run the company 15 years from now, but
Okay.
I will be. I'm hoping that as the company continues to grow, that we continue to hold that same mindset that this all has to make sense for our clients, has to be super comfortable for our clients, has to be on their timeline, and it has to be with their financial wins. So, again, I think that as PEO brokers multiply, you're going to get a lot of sales reps that have a lot more things to sell now. I think we were kind of, we're 5 years into the business now at this point. Like we know what to say yes to. We know what our clients should say yes to. And we also know that it doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense to bring a client on that's going to term in 6 months because they're oversold something on on a direct rep methodology.
So, little quick story. When I talk to business owners that are thinking about franchising, and I go through it with them, and I tell them very directly, there are 2 main reasons why I would not suggest you being a franchisor. One is if you're a control freak, you cannot be at all those franchise locations at one time or
Right.
at any reasonable time. So you're going to have to, you can't. Secondly, if you cannot put what is in your head, those recipes or the processes and procedures into an operations manual, and then ship it off and have people replicate it based on and there's training, but what you put in writing, then you shouldn't be a franchisor. What are the top 5 things that you tell clients that they should not enter into a PEO relationship after you've talked to them? What are those reasons typically?
General, I mean, I like to focus on the finances so that again, if we're not saving money and creating a better outcome for employees and the company, like that's my number one thing that I'm generally focusing on with employers. If you need me to get a whole list of 5, I may
You don't
need
have
that.
to give 5, just maybe
Yeah.
your top one. So for example, would you say that a particular industry is probably not suited for that because for whatever reason, the average premiums are too high, or it's just because of they're into chemicals, or
Yeah,
just some bizarre
I mean,
thing.
a lot of times, like and a lot of like my answers to this are all going to go back to how does it impact the finances, but like a lot of it goes into like, okay, how many part-timers do you have versus full-timers? Because again, you're creating net new costs for all those part-timers, and you're only going to save on the full-timers that are enrolling in benefits. So that could tilt the math in the bad way. I'd also say like the thought process around like every PEO client is renewed on their own performance. Like I think that a lot of people think that if I'm getting a 30-40% increase on a self-insured plan because I've had a massive claims year and I've got a projected massive claims year ahead, that you're going to get into a PEO relationship and you're going to experience, 5 to 10% increases instead of 40. Like if the PEO is losing money on you, they're going to make sure that you want to leave them after that first year, and they're going to increase you accordingly. So I'd say like that's another and I think that's what healthcare brokers as a whole haven't really, like they pivot to PEO sometimes whenever their clients are getting big increases, but that just means you're creating a really bad outcome for a client to go through a big payroll transition into a new model that they think is going to keep their costs down year over year. And the PEOs can increase the cost by however much they see fit based on that utilization. So I'd say that it's something I would steer against. And believe it or not, like the way the PEOs underwrite, I mean, a 10-person group that's all male versus in their 30s versus a 10-person group that's all female in their 30s in baby making years could be dramatically different as it relates to the finances. They may do much better on the open market. I don't really shy away from the conversation, regardless of like if those things are coming up. I'd rather just educate them on where not to spend their time or waste their time, because for every one of me, there's 100 PEO reps in Charlotte that are out there trying to make a quota and ignoring all the reasons why something's going to fall on its face and focus solely on what's going to sell a deal. So I like to try to be the voice of reason, so people aren't the ones that are pounding the drum against PEO because of their bad experience down the road as the company continues to evolve and mature.
So this is going to take you in the way back machine, but what I love about what you do is you're not just, finding the right thing, but you are actively negotiating ongoing, right? I mean, you're leveraging and all that kind of stuff. So it takes me back to a movie from 1998 called The Negotiator. So Samuel L. Jackson, very good in that, but Kevin Spacey was also very good in that. So you got to determine, are you going to be Samuel L. Jackson or are you going to be Kevin Spacey? So you don't have to answer that.
Gary, you got to determine if my 9-year-old self watched that movie.
No, I know.
But no,
I can vouch for it. It was a good movie.
We'll put it on the PairPEO watch list, and then I'll be able to answer that question for you.
I think that's what you should do. Yeah, your 9-year-old self, it was probably not appropriate for your 9-year-old self, but it'd probably be worth going back and watching it now. So
yeah, it aged well. I don't even know if I've ever seen that come across any of my streaming services. I think I would have recognized the
it's good.
Spacey and Samuel L.
Yeah, they're expert hostage negotiators. And so, there's a lot of that we feel like as business owners, we feel hostage, like we're held hostage to these big insurance companies. And, so anyway, all right. Netflix. All right, Papa Joe, you've seen it probably. All right. Any other questions before we round up at the top of the hour for everybody? First of all, put on your calendar, March 28th. We're going to do this baby live back at the Hamilton. 2 years ago, it was called 820. Oh, yeah. And so we've already secured the venue, talked with Caratatio, and we're going to be back there on the 28th. It will be our 200th week anniversary. And we're going to have some fun and frivolity there. And Kara's already got some, and we're going to be in the karaoke bar. They're reopening the karaoke lounge in April. So we'll be.
Do you sing, Gary? Are you going to be a
No. I'm a drummer. I'm somebody who hangs around musicians, and I'm not a singer. But anyway, she said, you guys need to be going in like the Dun Kings, which I missed that commercial on the Super Bowl. But
That's one.
Look it up. I loved the Geico, the babies, or not Geico, E-Trade. The E-Trade toddlers that were playing pickleball. I've just been a huge fan of that one. So that one got me, but I missed the Dun Kings. But it's pretty funny. If you haven't seen it, go look it up. So we'll see
ready.
if
I'm ready for it. Let's bring it.
We could be called the Dumb Kings.
Be more accurate. What
The
time is it going?
dumb
What time is going on the 28th, Gary?
11 o'clock, 11 to noon, same time. And we'll be
Oh.
broadcasting it, but we will do a live audience and there will be, limited amounts of seats. I think we can get 100 people in there safely and comfortably. I think it will hold 150, but that might be a little bit tight. But nonetheless, we'll have some fun with that. We did in the 100th week anniversary. That was a ton of fun. So,
And we're so appreciative of our audience that we're going to feed all of you as well.
yes, we are.
So food and beverage provided.
So y'all expecting like 11 to noon would be like this, and then some like hang out for an hour or so
Yeah.
afterwards, something like that.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's kind of what we did. People were eating while we were juking and jiving. So without
Awesome.
the
Sounds like a
karaoke
blast.
machine, we were actually on the webinar. So anyway, put that on your calendar. We'll start broadcasting some announcements about that and invitations. So
Kara
thank you
said we can
everybody
use a
for
smoke
joining
machine
us.
this year, right?
Oh, I think we should. I think this.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as long as it doesn't cause us to have lung damage, I'd say
And now that
yes.
we know that there's pressure plates that change the colors, so when we were shifting, Jeff, when we were shifting our weight last year, colors, something was happening. We're like, what's going on? But apparently that is part there. The pressure plate was activated for movement, so it changes the colors.
Oh, cool.
So
Cool.
It's
Yeah.
a cool venue. If you don't know where it is, it's in Avid Exchange area. It's next to the Fillmore and VBGB, which the Tatio's on as well, is right across the parking lot. It's a cool place. So
Well, I have it
anyway,
on my
that'd be
calendar.
fun.
Yeah, PairPEO will be represented there.
All right.
sweet.
Fly Jane down from Philly.
Oh, come on, let's not get crazy. She bailed
Okay,
today.
come
I
on.
can't reward her like that. She's in the
Tell
doghouse.
Brock he's invited too.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll let him know.
Yeah, bring Brock. All right, guys. This will be up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel later on this afternoon, and Jack Santinello and his team will put it up on the Shoemaker YouTube channel as well. Thank you guys for joining us next week, 195. Thank you
All right.
again, Jeff.
See you
Thanks,
guys.
Jeff.
Bye.
See you guys.
See you.